Here begins tape number 1 in the videotape deposition of Donald J. Trump in the matter of Trump Old Post Office LLC versus CZ National LLC and BVS Acquisition Co. LLC in the Superior Court of the District of Columbia, case number 2015 CA 005890B. Today's date is June 16th, 2016. The time on the video monitor is 9:59. The videographer today is Zach Arnson-Serrata, representing Planet Depots. This video deposition is taking place at 1200 17th Street Northwest, Washington, D.C. Would counsel please voice identify themselves and state whom they represent?
Rebecca Woods, counsel for Trump Old Post Office. I also have with me Alan Garton, general counsel for the Trump Organization.
Deborah Baum, counsel for the defendants, CZ National LLC and BVS Acquisition Company LLC.
The court reporter today is Debbie Whitehead, representing Planet Depots. Would the reporter please swear in the witness?
Can you raise your right hand?
Yes,
Do you swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Trump, and again, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Would you state your full name for the record, please?
Donald John Trump.
And I imagine you've had your deposition taken a number
I
of
have,
times.
yes.
So you know the drill, and
I do.
won't waste anyone's time going through it.
Good, thank you.
Do know that if you need to take a break, I'm happy to let you in.
Very good, thank you.
What did you do to prepare for the case today, for the deposition?
I would say virtually nothing. I spoke with my counsel for a short period of time. I just arrived here and we proceeded to the deposition.
Thank you. So you didn't look at any documents or
No, I didn't.
anything? And of course, I don't want to know what you talked about with your counsel. Let me quickly have this marked as the next deposition exhibit, which I believe is 182. And then this time remembered, sorry, to bring a copy for you, Alan. Trump, that's the notice of your deposition, actually technically the second amended notice. At the very last page, page 8, there is a list of documents requested. Did anyone ask you to look for documents related to this case?
I believe my lawyer did, and he looked for them with my secretaries.
Do you keep handwritten notes?
No.
I think your daughter told me in her deposition that you don't email, and I observed that that's because you're a very smart person.
Yes, we've figured that out. It took a lot of people a long time to figure that out. That's right.
But do you make notes? Do you have anything on paper related to this case?
No, I don't.
What do you know about this case? What's your understanding of this case, other than anything your lawyers told you?
Well, it's a restaurant with a good name and a good reputation.
And by it, do you mean Mr. Zakarian's restaurants?
Yes,
Or?
yes. We worked long and hard and spent a lot of money, even in legal fees, to get a lease signed. It was a very prime spot in the building. I actually think he made a mistake by not doing it, because I think he would have done well there. But a very prime spot in the building, and ultimately it got signed. I believe my son Don worked on it for the most part, but I haven't been involved in it almost at all. But we were happy to have him in the building.
What do you know about the lawsuit?
Well, I just know that they canceled the lease, I guess based on the fact I'm running for office, and they thought I made statements that were inflammatory in some form, and I don't know if they sent out a notice. I think what was maybe worse than sending out a notice, they went to the press, and essentially it became a press deal, but they tried to get out of their lease. I assume at some point they sent us a notice or whatever. I don't know. I don't think I've ever seen the notice, but I know it's been terminated anyway. They terminated the lease in their mind.
What do you mean in their mind?
Well, I mean they wanted to get out of the lease, so they sent us a notice. But we feel we have a lease.
What do you think they wanted to get out of the lease?
I don't.
Objection. Sorry. Objection foundation.
I don't understand why they did this. I'm running for office. I obviously have credibility because I now, as it turns out, became the Republican nominee, running against, we have a total of 17 people that were mostly senators and governors, highly respected people. So it's not like, you know, like I've said anything that could be so bad, because if I said something that was so bad, they wouldn't have had me go through all of these people and win all of these primary races, and I'm pretty even in the polls, or close to even in the polls right now. So, so I was very surprised that he wanted to get out of the lease.
Did you have any understanding at the time of the termination as to why he wanted to get out of the lease?
I wasn't too much involved in it. It was mostly my son and daughter, who you know.
Okay. Have you had any conversations with either, well, with not just your children, but any of your internal Trump team regarding this lawsuit?
No. No, not at all, other than Mr. Garten for a couple of minutes.
And I'm not asking about what
Yeah,
you talked
that's
with him
okay.
about, because he's your counsel.
But no, I haven't really discussed it.
Okay. Have you had any discussions with Ivanka or Donald Jr. at all about this dispute?
Other than they said that I guess he wanted to get out, and that was a while ago. Since then, I haven't discussed it. I didn't even discuss their deposition that I assume they took with you, based on your statement.
Are you you're the majority owner of the old post office entity,
Yes.
correct? Do you know what percentage you own? Beneficially or directly?
Well, my children have a piece. We own 100% as a company. My children have a piece of it.
And who is, but you personally are the majority owner
Oh,
or
yes.
beneficial owner of the
Yes.
entity?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know what percentage you own?
I guess it's close to 80%.
Who's the decision maker for the Trump old post office entity?
I would say in this case Ivanka and Don. I am ultimately, but I rely on them to make the decisions.
Has that changed over time?
I think as they've become older and wiser, I give them more and more decision-making ability. But they have the right to make a decision, yes.
At the outset of the Trump organization's desire to pursue a lease from the GSA for this property, were you principally in charge at that point in time?
My daughter mostly was involved, Ivanka, I would say more than anybody else.
What's your vision for the old post office hotel project?
Well, I think it's going to be a beautiful project. We're opening fairly soon. Too bad we don't have the restaurant in it. We would have liked to have had the restaurant. We think it would have been good for the hotel. But we'll be opening soon, and it'll be a luxury hotel. Hopefully one of the great hotels of the world. The building is spectacular. But the building is really spectacular, and the construction has come out very well.
Has your vision for the hotel project changed over time?
Not too much, other than the restaurant, actually, and the restaurants. Not too much.
And when you say the restaurant, you mean the Zakarian
Yes.
restaurant?
Yes.
And there were originally going to be two restaurants,
Right.
one in the Cortile
Correct.
Central Space, the
Correct.
Jose Andres restaurant,
Yes.
and you now have BLT,
BLT, yes.
and no restaurant in the northwest corner, which was
No.
going to be the Zakarian space.
We didn't have time. I would have rather had a restaurant. We just didn't have time to do it.
How would you describe the Trump brand?
A luxury brand. I think it's a brand where people know we get things done. It's a very successful brand, and does well
Around the world.
around the world, yes.
And is it fair to say that you are the person largely responsible for building that brand?
Yeah.
And is it fair to say that you are the individual mostly associated with that brand?
Objection.
Yeah, I mean, yes, and I think my children are coming more and more into it. Ivanka probably in particular, but they're coming more and more into it.
Okay. Next exhibit. This is 183. Mr. Trump, showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 183. These are materials we got from your website, and you're free to, but I don't mean to ask you to take your time to read the whole thing. But toward the end, it says, Mr. Trump is personally involved in everything that his name represents. This commitment has made him the preeminent developer of quality real estate known around the world, and in all his endeavors, the Trump gold standard is apparent. See that?
Yes.
Is that a true statement?
Yes.
And when it says that you're personally involved in everything that your name represents, what does that mean, that your name represents?
Well, I think that, you know, I do things that don't necessarily have my name on it, but I'm involved with, when we put our name on a hotel such as this one, which is very important, I'm very much involved in the details. I was involved in the design of the building and the room sizes and the entrances and the lobby and the marble and the bathrooms and the fixtures and the bars and a lot of things. I mean, you know, I'm involved very much with the hotel. The important projects, I get very much involved.
And I imagine that's an important matter of pride to you, because you
Yeah.
know your name and you are associated with that brand.
That's right.
Have you put a value on the Trump brand?
It's hard to value. People put values on it, and you hear all different values. So it would be, you know, I just wouldn't want to know. I guess Forbes, for instance, in their magazines, they say they don't value brands. Others do value brands. Coca-Cola is an example, or Pepsi-Cola. I think they have, most of their company is the value of their brand, not the value of the trucks or plants. So I don't know, it's something that comes up on occasion, but I never know quite how to answer that question, because I think it's a very valuable brand, but I wouldn't really know how to answer the question.
Have you had valuations done of the brand?
I don't know. I don't think I've seen one, but I think there was one done for the company a while ago.
Do you know what it was?
It was over $2 billion, I believe.
What do you think drives the success of your hotels?
Good management and great locations and great buildings. We have great buildings, and they're in great locations, and we have very good management.
What impact do you think your political campaign has had on the success of your hotels?
I don't think it's had much. People have been coming to the hotels for a long time, and I mean, I could tell you one example where it's actually been very positive is in Florida, Mar-a-Lago. It's had a very positive impact. The manager told me recently, he said, boy, it's the best, it is actually the best year we've ever had at Mar-a-Lago. Mm-hmm. And I was looking at the numbers. I said, what do you attribute this to? He said, the campaign. I mean, he said that. And we've had that elsewhere. So, but overall, I'd say it's fairly steady with, you know, it's, I don't think it's had a huge impact one way or the other.
Mm-hmm. Where it has had the positive impact that
Right.
you've described, what do you attribute that to?
I don't know. I mean, it's just, well, this is in Palm Beach. You know, the example I gave is in Palm Beach, and it's a pretty political place. You know, people want to be involved maybe in the process. I don't know what it is. But I think, you know, overall, it could even be a positive impact on the facilities as opposed to neutral. I don't know exactly. If you were to ask me, I would say more positive than anything else.
And do you attribute that, to the extent it has an effect, it's because people associate you with the hotels and they want to be a part of your political
Yeah,
campaign
maybe.
to the extent they're favorably disposed?
Well, maybe the success of the campaign. You know, people have said there's never been anything like this. O'Reilly said the other night, I think something to the effect that this is one of the great phenomena that he's ever seen in his lifetime. You know, so I mean, it's been pretty amazing. You have 17 people, and I end up at the top of, you know, one of the two parties. So I don't know how it's going to happen from here. We'll see. I mean, we're going to know in 5 months, right? But it's been, you know, it's been a lot of wins. We've beaten a lot of people, and I think people like that. So I think it's had a. I think it'll be great for the building in question. I think we would have really been helped if we had that extra, you know, that restaurant that we wanted to have very much. I think it would have made the building more successful. And I think he would have done well.
There have been a couple of reports that have suggested that the campaign has had a pretty strong negative impact on your hotels. I'm going to ask you to just take a look at them, see if you've seen these before. Would you mark this one? $184. And here's another. This is $185. Are you familiar with the survey that's described in the Forbes article, which is marked as Exhibit 184?
No, I'm not. I've never seen. I haven't seen the article. I haven't seen the survey.
Okay. Has anyone talked to you about the survey, which
No.
apparently showed that 45% of people said they'd make a specific point of not visiting a Trump-branded hotel or golf properties over the course of the next 4 years?
No, I haven't seen it.
And similarly, is the answer the same with respect to Exhibit 185, which describes a study by Hipmunk, which I will confess I've never heard of.
I've never heard of it either.
It says it caters to younger people, and that may be why.
Query why they published the study.
Pardon?
Query why they published the study.
Anyway.
I've never seen it.
Okay. This one, the Hipmunk study, says that the hotel bookings dropped more than 59% in 2016 compared to the same period in 2015. Is that accurate?
No, no, it's not accurate. It's not accurate. No, I think we're doing very well.
Okay. Have you had conversations with your team internally about the impact, if any, of the campaign
No,
on the hotels?
no, I have not.
When did you first hear of Jeffrey Zakarian, Mr. Trump?
Actually, through my son, Don, and maybe Ivanka, but through my son, Don, who said, you know, good reputation, good restaurateur, and that they were close to signing a lease with him after a pretty long negotiation.
Okay. So you hadn't heard of him until they told you we're close to having the deal done. You weren't involved earlier.
That's right.
And apart from anything you've learned in this case, what do you know about Mr. Zakarian?
Not much.
Anything?
No, I mean, I really don't. I just know he operates a good restaurant.
Have you ever been to any of his restaurants?
No, I have not.
And do you know anything about Lou Ceruzzi?
No.
Beginning, do you know, in placing it in time, when you first heard about the negotiations with Mr. Zakarian or his entity?
A while ago. Again, Don handled the negotiations. The only thing I knew is that he told me he's negotiating with Zakarian.
And did you approve of those 2014 timeframe?
Yes, yes. Prior to the signing of the lease.
And do you know when the lease was signed?
No.
Let me show you what's been marked, or it has not yet been marked. Please mark this, it's 186. Mr. Trump, Exhibit 186 is, looks like a press release that was issued by your organization, the Trump Hotel Collection, in September 2013. And does your organization put out press releases like this from time to time?
Yes.
Okay. This one, Exhibit 186, describes at the top that you, Donald Trump Jr., Ivanka Trump, and Eric Trump unveiled the details of the plans for the development of the old post office.
Okay.
Do you recall putting this press release out?
Well, I wouldn't have done it. This was done by probably the PR people with my my children.
Okay. On the second page, second paragraph, beginning construction is scheduled to begin.
Right.
It's construction scheduled to begin in spring 2014 with an expected completion in late 2015.
Okay.
Okay. Was that accurate at the time?
Perhaps. Yeah. We were very much ahead of schedule. We're actually ahead of schedule, and we also went higher end than we even thought in terms of finishes and materials.
Mm-hmm.
So we were thinking about completion sometime at the end of 2015. We wanted to take a little bit more time and make it, just perfect, because we're so far ahead of schedule,
Mm-hmm.
which was, I think schedule was 18, actually.
What do you mean by schedule was 18?
Meaning,
what schedule?
We wanted to have it built prior to 18. We originally had, you had to be open. I think it was 18 as a specific date, and we're going to be opening in 16.
Is that why I've seen things that say, for example, we're opening 2 years ahead of schedule?
We're substantially ahead of schedule.
Okay. At what point did you change or make the decision to change the expected completion date from the end of 2015 to late in 2016?
Oh, I don't think it was a big change. We actually went more upscale. We went a little more complicated design. The finishes were better, take longer to install. We went with the highest grade of marble. It takes a little bit more time. Even to get the material takes a little bit more time.
Mm-hmm. Apart from the cost of the higher quality materials, how much, was that a very costly decision for you to make, just the delay in opening?
No, not really, because it was a very, there was just a vast, pretty big period of time. We weren't sure exactly when. You never know until you really get, especially with renovation, you never know until you get into the job. Yeah, the material cost more money than we were originally going to spend.
Well, I mean, really, apart from not talking about the cost of the enhanced materials or the new designs, isn't it the truth that just the delay in opening would have cost you a lot? Or is it the case that you had so much buffer?
I never viewed 15. I always viewed we would open sometime toward the end of 16. Mm-hmm. I think much more so than 15. But
so that delay didn't cost you particularly?
No, we never thought of it. I always viewed it as being a 16. To do it properly, 16 would be sometime during the year 16.
So your son Donald, I think you told me a few minutes ago, told you about conversations with Mr. Zakarian, or his, if I say Mr. Zakarian, you understand that the lease is with an entity.
Right, sure.
His entity, in the same way that your lease is a
Okay.
Trump entity.
Okay.
Did you have any understanding about the key business points in the lease negotiations?
No, I didn't.
Did they tell you how they were going? Was there any issue?
No, never did. Just, we have a deal.
Just we have a deal?
We have a deal. They
Okay.
said, we just signed the lease, we have a deal with Zakarian.
Okay. So they said, we just signed a lease and we have a deal?
Don did. He told me when they signed the lease. I don't know when that was, but it was a while ago. But he told me we have a signed lease for the restaurant.
Do you remember anything else he told you about the lease?
No, not at all.
Do you remember whether it had a guarantee, whether there was a letter of credit?
He told me there was a letter of credit. I think he told me there was a guarantee. I think this was a while ago, he discussed a couple of the points of the deal.
Mm-hmm.
And most importantly, he said a good quality person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And restaurant.
Mm-hmm. When you say he discussed a couple of the points of the deal, do you remember what any of those were?
The basic rent and the guarantee, the restaurant. They showed me a rough sketch of what was, conceivably going to be built. But that's a very, very short conversation. I said, fine, I have confidence in him. And he liked it, so I liked it.
Okay. Was the guarantee important to you?
Yeah, it was, because I think we would have been able to, then we had plenty of time. It wasn't like we were rushed like we are now. I think that, we wanted to have a guarantee because we would have been able, I'm sure, to get another restaurant. And, we want to make sure once we have the restaurant, we'll work hard to make that restaurant successful. We'll help the restaurant. I think the hotel would be very good for the restaurant. But the guarantee, yeah, it's important, and it's pretty standard. I think it's it's a negotiated point, but it's pretty standard.
Mm-hmm. And why is it important to you?
I want to make sure, you mean the guarantee of the rent?
Right.
I want to make sure I get my rent. Because we're giving up a space, and you want to make sure you get the rent.
And did you focus on the fact that this was a lease deal instead of a management deal?
Yes, he told me it was a lease deal instead.
Was that significant to you?
Yes.
Why?
I'd rather have a lease deal.
Why?
It's a better deal.
Why?
Because they pay rent and it's assured, as opposed to a management deal, which you never know how it's going to work out.
What do you mean you never know how it's going to work out?
You don't. I mean, a management deal, you never know how it's going to work out. Whereas a rent, you know what your rent is. That's why the combination of a rent and a guarantee is a good deal if you can make it.
I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm having trouble understanding your answer. When you say a management deal, you never know how it's going to work out. What do you mean?
Well, if you do good business, that's fine. But with a management deal, if you do bad business, you don't do well. You can lose money. With rent, you just get your rent automatically every month. It's much simpler.
With restaurants, you never know how you're going to do.
Honestly, you never know. That's true.
All right. Show you, Mr. Trump, a copy of what's been marked as Deposition Exhibit 25. Counsel, this is the copy of the lease that I think that you used in Jeffrey Zakarian's deposition. It's Exhibit 25, and it's the Trump documents that were produced. We noticed that there are some duplicate pages in it for some reason. I think the court reporter
We
may
wanted
have
to make it look bigger.
But it was very impressive. It does look bigger, but it looks like
it's a big lease.
So I'm going to
lease?
apologize in advance, Mr. Trump, for showing you, but I
okay.
think they said they took some of the extra pages out, but there may be some duplicate
That's
pages in
okay.
there. Here you go.
Thank you.
And I have extra copies here. So this is Exhibit 25. If you look at my understanding, the reason I was puzzled by your answer earlier about your son telling you the lease had been signed, my understanding is that you signed this lease. And if you look at
That's true. He
Okay.
asked me, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I believe I signed the lease. But he came in and said, we're signing the lease. So
He said,
I'll change it.
we're
Yes.
signing it.
Because I think I signed it.
Okay.
I'll tell you in a
It's
second.
Topo 001968. Take a look there.
Yeah, that's my signature, yes.
And did you review the lease at all before you signed it?
No.
So did you have any understanding when you signed the lease as to what your rights were relative to getting damages against the tenant in the event of a default by the tenant?
No, when I signed the lease, you know, my son said we have the lease, so I signed the lease. But really, they knew it much better than I did. I wasn't involved in the lease. I signed it, but I wasn't involved in it.
And how many leases like this have you reviewed in your career?
Signed or reviewed?
Reviewed.
Not too many. I signed hundreds, much more than that. But I don't generally review them. I have somebody that, whether it's an executive or in this case, one of my children, you know, I rely on people to do these things, including lawyers that I've had for many years, like a Mr. Garten or somebody. So I rely. So I very rarely get too involved in that. I will sometimes get involved in the rent, what the rent should be, and maybe if there's a guarantee or not a guarantee, which is a major event. But for the most part, I'm not involved in the details of the lease.
So I take it that, for example, if you would turn to page 1933. Section 23D.
Okay. Okay, got it. Yeah.
You did not review this section
What
of the
does that
lease,
say?
monetary damages. This is in the remedies
I
section.
did not, no.
Okay. Would you be able to read this section and tell us what your understanding of it is?
Objection. Mr. Trump isn't a lawyer.
I mean, do you want me to read it? It's long.
It is long.
It's very long.
It is long. I would like you to read just the monetary damages section, starting at the number 1 in the middle of the page. Just there. The rest of that, and to the end of that, it continues on the next page. And tell me what you think, reading that, you as the landlord are entitled to get from the tenant in the event of a tenant breach in the way of damages.
I don't have my glasses. I mean, I am at a disadvantage because I didn't bring my glasses. This is such small writing.
All right, well, well, if the witness can't actually physically read the language,
I
that's a
mean,
problem.
it's very
but
small writing.
I
I
also-
can make it out. Do you want me to try?
Well, we can have,
Let's
you know
just
what
do it.
we can do? We can have a bigger copy made of these pages.
Let
and
me
we'll
try.
come
Let me
back to
just do it.
All right, I have to place on the record a hearty objection.
Yeah, it's all damages that the landlord may sustain, including all legal fees and everything else involved. Looks like everything in the kitchen sink to me. Then you have number 2. It's the value of the positive difference with the aggregate amount of the base rent and the additional rent.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, basically it's saying you have to pay all damages, and going forward you have to pay rent and other things. I mean, it's a complex clause, but it's a pretty standard damages clause, I
Okay.
think you'll find.
Would you agree with me that it says here in part 2, in the, you know, you have an alternative, that you can either elect to recover in the way of
Well,
rent.
the landlord can elect.
The landlord, yes, you, the landlord, can either elect a sum that at the time of the cancellation represents the positive difference, if any, between the aggregate amount of the base rent and additional rent that would have been payable. So what the tenant would have paid under the lease, right? So the difference between that,
Right.
right? And then if you go over to the next page,
Or,
now this is minus, so the difference
Right.
between everything he would have paid minus the aggregate rental value of the demised premises for the same period, discounted to present value.
okay.
Okay? So what do you understand the aggregate rental value to be?
Objection.
Well, we're getting no rental value now. I'm not sure that we could have rented it. I don't know that we could have rented it. But we're getting no rental. It was not an easy space to rent, to be honest with you. And he agreed to pay rent, and he agreed to take the responsibility of the restaurant, which is important because we didn't want to have losses. And so this would be the rent that he's paying, less some kind of a rent that we get. I don't know that we could have gotten a rent.
Okay? It says the rental value. Do you know what the rental
Well,
value?
sure, the rental value.
Objection.
So you'll have to find out what is the rental value.
Right.
But the rental
Okay.
value.
Do you know what the rental value is?
No,
Okay.
no.
All right. Then let's turn, if you would please, Mr. Trump, to page 1939 regarding the letter of credit. Just a quick question on that one.
Okay.
I won't make
Okay,
you read
we
it.
got it. Thank you.
Did you ever read this section of the lease
No.
on the security deposit guarantee letter of credit?
No, I didn't.
Okay. In section 4 of the sublease, you can look at it if you like, but did you understand that the tenant agreed to use and occupy the demised premises for a first-class, in all respects, restaurant?
Yes,
And you understood that that was an obligation that the Zakarian entity had?
that's right.
And did you also understand in section 36D of the lease that the tenant agreed to hire and maintain reasonably adequate personnel for the efficient service of its customers?
Yes.
Do you understand, as a businessman, understanding you're not a lawyer and I don't want to know what your lawyers told you, but do you generally understand that in every contract, and particularly in every lease, there is a covenant of good faith and fair dealing on the part of both parties implied into every lease?
I don't know how you define that. I mean, I just don't know. I just know we have a lease that said you're going to occupy a premises. We took it off the market. We thought we had a deal. We had a deal for quite some time. And, I mean, he just didn't live up to his deal.
But my question is, do you understand that there is a duty of good faith and fair dealing that's implied on to the part of both parties in every
I
lease
don't know.
deal?
I mean, I don't know. I want a fair deal. I just don't know what the lease is.
Do you agree generally that regardless of what's specifically written in the lease, you as the owner can't then interfere with the tenant's right and duty to do what he's required and entitled to do under the lease, which is operate and profit from a successful restaurant?
I just don't know what the lease says. It's a very big lease. I don't know what the lease says
Yeah.
on it.
Well, my question, sir, respectfully, was that apart from what the lease says, whatever the lease says, do you understand that you can't then go and just interfere in some way with the tenant's right and obligation to open and profit from a successful restaurant?
Objection calls for a legal opinion.
I just don't know. I mean, we're not interfering. We didn't interfere. We gave him the premises. He chose not to take the premises, and so I mean, I haven't interfered with him.
As a business person, do you understand that you could, well, strike that. is it your understanding as a business person that you could go and announce outside Mr. Zakarian's restaurant that he's a terrible chef?
Objection.
I think I could do that, actually. I mean, you know, if he, let's say he was doing a bad job, let's say he opened a restaurant, he wasn't doing a good job, and somebody asked me, I think I could probably say I didn't like his restaurant. That doesn't mean I'm right or wrong, but I could probably say that, and he could counter me, but he'd still be paying his rent, and still be serving, and still would have control over the premises.
Do you think that you could go stand outside his restaurant and say, you'll get food poisoning if you eat here, don't eat here?
Objection.
Probably could say that, but I wouldn't say that, but I probably could say that.
And when you say you could say that, you could say it without violating any duties under the lease.
I don't know what the lease
Objection. Calls
says.
for a legal opinion. Also calls for speculation.
I just don't know what the lease says.
But
You
if
know,
it,
once you have a lease, you know, when you have a lease, you have a lease, and I just don't know what the lease says as to that.
I will tell you, the lease doesn't specifically say you can't go stand outside and say you can't eat here. And the lease doesn't say you can't do any of these things. So just assuming the lease doesn't specifically address it, is it your testimony that you could say, stand outside his restaurant saying don't eat here? You as the owner.
Well,
Same
over the years, I've seen many landlord-tenant disputes, and I've seen horrible things said both ways. But the tenant is never released from paying his rent. I've seen unbelievable disputes where people are fighting like cats and dogs, and the tenant keeps paying the rent.
Well, the question is, though, could you stand outside his restaurant with a sign saying, do not eat here?
Speculation, legal conclusion.
I just don't know. I really don't know. I guess I could. If, you know, he's got to pay his rent, and he would have to challenge me or go to court to have the sign removed. Normally what would happen in a case like that is you would be hired, you'd go to court to get the sign removed.
But you think you would be within your rights to do it, as far as the lease is concerned, and your obligations as a landlord?
Well, I think he'd have to pay his rent, yeah, and he could go to court and have me take down the sign.
Okay. Do you think that you, under the, in terms of your obligations as the owner of the property, do you think that you could put out statements saying that Mr. Zakarian is a racist?
Objection.
Yeah, I guess if he was a racist, I could. If he was a racist, I could do that.
Do you think that would impact his ability to run and profit from successful restaurants?
That I don't know. I mean, he's got a lease. He's got to. I don't know. That he's got a lease. He's got to pay his. He's got to pay his rent. I mean, you know, you can't. If somebody says that, would mean that every document ever signed, if somebody gets into a verbal dispute, that would mean all of the many leases all over this country would be terminated because somebody has, you know, got into a verbal dispute. I mean, that would mean arbitrators would have to be set up for what is a verbal dispute. You know, just you couldn't. You wouldn't have a country of laws. I mean, it would be a mess if you went by a standard like that. He's got a lease. He pays his rent. He can go to court and challenge me. He can go to court and sue me. He can sue me for libel if I said something like that. But I think he'd have to continue to operate his restaurant and pay his rent.
Similarly, would your answer be the same with respect to assuming that you stood outside his restaurant and said that Mr. Zakarian was anti-Hispanic? Do you think that would interfere with his ability to operate a successful restaurant?
He'd go to court and he'd have me taken, you know, the sign down or however method you want to talk about. But you'd go to court and you'd ask for a judgment that I would take down the sign.
Do you think if the word got out that Mr. Zakarian were anti-Hispanic, that it would potentially affect the success of his restaurant?
I don't know.
Objection.
I don't know. I really don't know.
Okay. You understand, I'm sure, that what brings us together today is the decision that Mr. Zakarian and his entity made in the wake of the comments that you made when you announced your candidacy for president in June of 2016.
Okay.
And we have the transcript of what was said, but I don't think we need to go through all of it, but specifically focusing on the comments about Mexicans and immigrants, and making comments about Mexicans bringing
Illegal immigrants, yes, illegal.
Okay. And I
Which is a
understand.
very big topic in this country. And which is a topic that, you know, has led to my nomination in a major party in the country. So it's not a very out there topic.
With respect to the speech that you made, and specifically the focus on Mexicans and immigrants, did you write this statement in advance? Was it written?
No,
And did you plan in advance what you were going to say?
yes,
Okay. Did you talk to other people about it?
no.
Did you give any thoughts to the effect that your statement relative to Mexicans and immigrants would have on tenants in your current or future projects?
No, no, I didn't. I didn't at all.
You believe your comments have been misinterpreted by the media, correct?
Perhaps so, yeah. I think the media is very dishonest. But all I'm doing is bringing up a situation which is very real about illegal immigration. And I think, you know, most people think I'm right.
And would you agree that you've taken the position that the media has misinterpreted your comments and liberal groups have misinterpreted your comments?
Well, I don't know. Some have misinterpreted them, some haven't. I mean, so the voters, I don't think, have. I got more votes than anybody in the history of the Republican Party primaries, by a lot. And, you know, that's pretty mainstream when you think about it.
You have definitely tapped into something.
Something, right? It's possible that I'll help him as opposed to hurt him.
Help who?
If he had the restaurant, it would be helped as opposed to hurt.
Why do you think that?
Because you just said it. I mean, I've tapped into something, and I've tapped into illegal immigration. I've tapped into other things also. But, you know, when you get more votes than anybody in the history of the party by far, more than Ronald Reagan, more than Richard Nixon, more than Dwight D. Eisenhower, who won the Second World War, you know, that's pretty mainstream when you think about it.
There have been a number of businesses that have terminated their relationships with you in the wake of particularly the comments regarding Mexicans and immigrants, correct?
Well, there was not like no extension. Macy's was an example. No extension. I'm not even sure we had to deal with Macy's, but we ceased that relationship. Yes.
And they publicly attributed it to the comments regarding Mexicans.
I don't know. I
and
think so. Yes.
And would the same be the case for Univision?
But I didn't have a lease with Macy's.
Right.
Okay. I didn't have a lease. You know, I didn't have that kind of a deal. It was just a month-to-month deal. With Univision, I had a signed contract. We went to court, and they paid a substantial amount of money to me.
To settle?
Yes.
And what was your understanding of the reason for Univision terminating the relationship with you?
I guess they didn't like my comments. I think they made a mistake. I think they feel they might have made a mistake, but you'll have to ask them. But I guess they didn't like my comments.
And is the same the case with NBC?
Well, NBC wanted to renew me on The Apprentice, but I told them I can't do it. But they did, you know, the Miss Universe was not nearly as important to them. But NBC, that all worked out very well. I don't know exactly what their reasoning was, but I can tell you they wanted to renew me very badly on The Apprentice.
But it was you who said not doing that.
I couldn't do it because I was doing this.
There are only so many hours in the day.
Well, you also have the equal time provisions. In other words,
Right, yeah.
I'm
Got
not
it.
allowed, essentially, I'm not allowed to do a
Got it.
show and,
Right.
and run for office.
Free advertising.
Which is, I think, unfair, but it's one of those things. And also, it is a time thing, but but you do actually have a legal reason as to why you can't do it. You would have to give every other candidate equal time, meaning 2 hours of primetime television. And I have a feeling they wouldn't like that.
Probably not. You also had a relationship with CERTA.
Yes, mattress.
What was the nature of the relationship with
Mattresses.
I
CERTA?
just want to jump in and just caution the witness to the extent that what you're being asked might intrude upon confidentiality agreements or...
Okay, fine. Yes.
You had a relationship with CERTA,
Yes.
contractual,
Yes.
and CERTA pulled out of that relationship in the wake of your campaign comments as
Well,
well,
there was no
correct?
extension or something, yes.
And did you have any understanding of what their reason for wanting to?
Not particular. I wasn't involved in it too much.
Did it cause you any concern that all of these entities wanted to apparently distance themselves from you in the wake of your comments?
No, I'm a big boy. I understand. I've been making these statements, by the way, for many years. This is not just new. You know, this isn't. When your client signed his lease, my views were out there very, very strongly.
Well, you would agree with me, wouldn't you, Mr. Trump, that they've gotten a lot more press in the last year?
No, I mean maybe more, but I can tell you that again, some people will do better because of it. And maybe some people won't. I can't answer that, but some people will do better. But I've been very strong on these. I've been very consistent. I've been very strong on the things that I said for years.
Debbie, will we have a moment to take a quick...
I would be grateful.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Back on the record, the time is 11:03.
Unless there be any confusion, we're calling this deposition for the moment confidential, as we did with the others.
Understood. I think we have an agreement that for the initially, they're all confidential until we, in the course of
Agree
time,
otherwise. Okay, thank you.
make our designations, which I assume will be more limited. But Mr. Trump, you understand you're still under oath.
Yes.
I want to go back to your testimony earlier when I asked you a series of questions about could you stand outside the restaurant and with a sign saying don't eat here, could you say Mr. Zakarian's a racist or anti-Hispanic? Is it fair to say that as far as your understanding of your obligations as a landlord, apart from any other legal defamation or libel type obligations you might have toward anyone you might say something about, in terms of your obligations as a landlord, you can stand out there and say whatever you want about Mr. Zakarian or his restaurant, and he still has to keep paying rent.
Objection.
Well, I would say that if I gave him the premises and the premises was in good shape, and on the assumption I had to provide the electricity and the air conditioning to his premises, et cetera, and all of those things were done, yeah, now he would have to handle me differently. He'd have to go to court and get some kind of an injunction or court order to get me to, leave the area or take down the sign.
But as far as you're concerned, he has to keep still paying rent because you haven't violated the lease
Objection.
by
Yes,
doing that.
That's true.
This is the next one, 187. Mr. Trump, this is the later press release, or hotel news resource actually. Trump International Hotel to open this September. This is dated February 9, 2016.
Okay.
This article says, and it looks like this was put out by Trump, is that correct?
Could be, yes.
It says Trump International Hotel, Washington, D.C. will open in September 2016, 2 years ahead of schedule.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And we talked a little bit about this earlier, but when you say schedule here, what is that a reference to?
I believe it's the reference to the agreement we have with General Services that we had to have it open by a certain time.
And
We're a couple of years ahead of schedule.
that certain time you believe is sometime in 2018?
I think so. Well, I'd like to check it, but I think so.
Okay. 188. Mr. Trump, Exhibit 188 is an article from, I know it's not your favorite media outlet, the Washington
No,
Post.
I agree. Highly inaccurate.
Page 2 has a comment from you. You're welcome to read the whole thing, but I'm really only going to ask you about a quote that they attribute to you on the second page, about 3/4 of the way down, where it says that you shrugged off news that a second chef, Jeffrey Zakarian, planned to pull out of a deal to open a restaurant. Jose Andres was the first to announce he was backing out, and then it provides a quote from you saying they each left massive deposits, okay, which I like very much. They each are personally guaranteeing the rent, and they did that just to be cool and politically correct, Trump told reporters, adding, we're already dealing with other people, some of the great chefs of the world. Is that a quote from you?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, what did you mean by they were guaranteeing the rent to be cool and politically correct?
I didn't think I said that. I think I said they were guaranteeing the rent, period, is what I meant. They did this to be cool and good, not to guarantee the rent.
Okay.
They weren't being cool to guarantee the rent.
I confess I was very confused about that.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's one way of looking at it, I guess. No, they guaranteed the rent, period, and then they were doing their grandstanding. I mean, if they would have gotten out very quietly, I think it would have been a lot better for everybody. They caused me damages because, you know, they made such a big deal out of it, and they didn't have to make a big deal out of it. So that was disappointing. No, but that's what I meant. They wanted to be, they thought, politically correct by doing what they did. I think they made a mistake.
And why do you think they made a mistake?
Because I think they would have done well with the restaurant.
And you said that they have, it would have been better for everybody if they'd done it quietly. How so?
Well, we wouldn't have gotten bad publicity. I got a lot of bad publicity because of the way they handled it. They grandstanded.
And how has that harmed you?
Just a bad day of press, a bad few days of press. I think it, you know, I don't know how I can quantify it, but I think we were hurt by the way they did it.
Do you think
They did it very publicly. My son had a lot of respect for your client, and I think they even talked that day, and then all of a sudden, you know, he did a grandstand move, which got him a lot of publicity, and I'm sure he felt great about it, but it wasn't good for me.
At the time, in the time period between when you first announced your candidacy in June, middle of June 2016, which I think it was in June.
16.
June 16.
June 16.
June 16, so a year ago.
16,
today.
16, exactly today.
Exactly
This
today.
is the one they did a big story today in the New York Times.
It's your anniversary.
It's 1 year anniversary. It's a big
Yeah.
story in the Times today.
Oh, good.
Not a horrible story. It's actually very nice. It's a pretty good story.
Yeah.
I'm not used to that. Okay.
Okay. So in the time period between when you announced on June 16, 2015, and when Mr. Andres and Mr. Zakarian's entities pulled out of their leases with the Trump organization, did anyone have any conversations with you about, along the lines of, look, if you retract these statements, look, if you, can clarify, modify, make it clear that you didn't mean what people are saying you meant, maybe we can salvage these deals.
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I mean, you'd have to ask my children, but I don't think so.
Did you have conversations with Ivanka in which she urged you to issue a clarifying statement?
No, not that I remember at all.
You have recently publicly stated that Judge Curiel in your Trump University case was biased against you
Counsel.
in that case, correct?
Yeah.
Objection.
Correct?
Yes.
And you mentioned specifically his Mexican heritage, correct?
Yes.
And is it your contention that he went so far as to violate his obligations of impartiality because he was biased against you?
I don't know.
Objection.
And then comments in the media seem to suggest that you felt that the fact that he was of Mexican heritage, you said, I'm building a wall, he's of Mexican heritage, seems to be a conflict of interest. Is that correct?
Well, I guess he doesn't feel it is. We'll see. I'll let you know about it. I think I've been treated very unfairly, but we'll see what happens.
What did you mean by that it's a conflict of interest?
Objection. Hold on a second. Counsel, can you draw the line for me on what this line of questioning has to do with this case?
Well, I think it's quite relevant
To
to
what?
the whole concept here in this case relates to how Hispanics and others are perceiving those comments, and I want to understand what Mr. Trump views.
But that's not your line of questioning. You're not asking those questions about what he understands Hispanic. First of all, I don't think that's at all relevant. But you're asking him about his opinions, and you're trolling for something that, frankly, might eventually be leaked to the media. So I'd ask counsel. I know you have broad leeway here, but please be mindful.
I am very mindful.
And
I think
bring
this
these
is-
questions into a relevancy zone.
I think this is relevant to this case. We have no intention. We haven't leaked anything to the media. We have no intention
You know
of
as well
leaking
as I do,
anything
this
to the media.
transcript eventually may well be public. Why don't you ask a couple more questions, and if I have concerns, we're going to take a break, and I'm going to consult with counsel.
Okay. Mr. Trump, well, I just want to understand why you think that your comments would cause a Latino or a person of Mexican heritage to potentially be biased against you
With respect to what?
with respect to anything.
I think in many cases they like me because what I'm doing is for the people that are in the country legally, and I'm starting to see that in polls. If Hispanics are in the country legally, many of them are liking what I say, including people from Mexico and other places, that if they're in the country legally, they're liking it. And they're liking what I'm saying about bringing back jobs to the United States, because we need jobs. We don't have jobs.
A lot of your comments about this particular judge related to his association with a group.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that have to do with how people in that group or with that affinity might behave toward you or your entities?
Well, what I said is named La Raza, and there's another La Raza, and I've been told they do have a connection, and they said some very inflammatory things, and extremely inflammatory things.
About what?
about Mexico, the United States, and various other things. And I think it was inappropriate. If it's true, I think it was inappropriate. And I've said it loud and clear.
And so, do you believe that many Latinos have misinterpreted your comments?
I don't know. I can't speak for other people. I can just say what my comments were. I'm fighting to keep jobs out of Mexico. I'm fighting to have Mexico not take our businesses away from us. Mexico is taking our businesses like we're children. Our leadership is not smart. We're losing millions of jobs to Mexico. We're losing billions of dollars to Mexico. And I'm fighting very hard for the United States. And that's what I'm referring to.
Do you think that Judge Curiel would patronize a Trump property?
I don't know. You'd have to ask him.
Have you done any analysis, you or anyone on your staff done any analysis to see if Latinos are less frequent patrons of Trump properties since your campaign announcement?
No.
Do you think that some Hispanic patrons would be less likely to patronize a restaurant in your hotel due to what you've described as misperception or mischaracterization of your comments?
Well, your clients is on the outside, first of all. I mean, it's really fronts on the outside of the building. I don't know. I think you'll get additional business, actually. I think you'll actually get additional business.
Why?
Because it's a hot hotel. And we're doing very well. Our bookings are very good. I mean, our booking's good, but I think it would have been much better. I think we would have been better had we had your client.
But you think what would have been better?
I think the hotel would have, I think it would have been great for the hotel, and I think it would have been great for your client.
Mm-hmm. When you say you think he would have gotten additional business, additional compared to what?
Maybe compared to where he would have been without.
Without what?
Without, as you say, my running for office. I think my running for office potentially would have helped him, as opposed to hurt him.
And that's because people don't necessarily separate Mr. Trump, the politician, from Mr. Trump, the owner of the property, and they want to have a part of the excitement.
Well, let me just be clear. My properties are totally separate and distinct from me. I'm
Understood.
an individual. That's a company. It's a corporation. So my properties
Understood that from a corporate
totally
standpoint.
separate. I think in many respects, beyond even corporate legal. It's totally separate from me as an individual. It also represents Ivanka and Don and Eric. But it's a totally separate situation.
Do you think that there are some Hispanic patrons who would be less likely to patronize any restaurant in any of your hotels or any of your properties?
It is always possible. I just don't know. I mean, I don't know how to answer that question. It's possible, but likewise, there could be some people that will come because of whatever it is, because of a candidate.
And why do you think, for example, the Palm Beach property is doing particularly well? I think you said earlier it's...
Because I think people like politics.
Politics.
Yeah. And they like to be around the name, and maybe me, I go there. But I think people really dig it.
Would you agree that the demographics in Washington, D.C. are decidedly different from the demographics in Palm Beach?
Well, at the high end, they may be very, very similar. You're talking about political, you're talking about a lot of wealth. So at the high end, I think they're probably similar.
Across the board, though, you would agree, wouldn't you?
Yes, I would say
quite
certainly
different.
across the board.
Okay. Do you believe that there are some number of liberal patrons, politically liberal people, media people, liberal people, who would make it a point not to patronize Trump properties in the wake of your campaign?
Well, like in your case, in your restaurant, if he did a great restaurant, I think for the most part, they want to go to the restaurant. They're not thinking about that. They want to go to a great restaurant.
But you don't have a crystal ball.
There
you
aren't
can't
that
tell,
many in Washington,
right?
believe me. There aren't that many in Washington, as you know.
That may be something we can agree on.
There aren't many. So this was a great opportunity, actually.
We're getting more better. We're getting better.
Good. Yeah, I would imagine.
Okay. When did you first hear that Mr. Zakarian's entity had terminated his lease with the Trump OPO?
I can't tell you when, but my son told me, Don.
And what did he tell you?
Essentially, I don't know if he used the word terminated. I don't know what the definition of the word would be, but he said that they're trying to get out of their lease.
Did you have a meeting with Ivanka about it?
It's possible, maybe a meeting where something about this was discussed.
Mark this. Did you see all those I put down and didn't use?
I'm impressed. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
It's the psychology of
I
rewarding
was
a
hoping.
witness.
I was hoping when you did that. I was hoping.
And would you mark? This is the next one, please. This is, what are we up to? Yes. Oh, no, I'm sorry. You're already has a sticker on it.
Okay.
This is previously marked as 162. We're saving time all over the place.
That's okay.
Okay, Exhibit 162, it was previously marked, is a Business Insider report titled "Donald Trump just released an epic statement raging against Mexican immigrants and disease." Would you agree that this is an example of
this one?
This one, 162.
Okay.
Wait, did I
don't
give
have-
you the wrong one?
No, he's got it. He's got it.
I have this one.
Yep.
Okay.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah, where is it?
It's the
Yeah.
lack of the glasses, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, where is it?
Oh, I'm
You're
sorry.
fine.
You know what?
Just let her
No,
ask the
I
question.
read the,
It's 162.
it's Exhibit 162.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jeffrey Zakarian pulls out of Trump Hotel project.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. On the second page, this document says, we know Jeffrey Zakarian very well. This is the Trump team sent out a statement in response. Bottom of the second page. So, did you read and approve that statement before it was issued?
I probably did, but I don't remember, but I probably did.
Okay.
Probably saw it.
It says here, Zakarian is using the distortions by the media of Mr. Trump's comments. Do you see that?
Yeah.
And do you agree that your comments were distorted by the media?
Yes.
In a big way?
Yeah. I think the media is very dishonest. I say it all the time. I think they're among the most dishonest human beings I've ever met. No, but I say that all the time.
Right, but I mean, in this instance, you believe there was a big deal made of this by the media.
Yeah, I think it was distorted, yes.
And you describe it, or the Trump organization describes it, as an opportunistic attempt to renege on clear and unequivocal obligations under his lease. Do you see that?
Yeah.
What about this was opportunistic? What was your understanding that he was trying to do to benefit himself?
He may have found out that the restaurant was going to be much more expensive to open than he thought because he started to get into it. He may have found out that maybe he just didn't think the business would be as good. I don't know. There are a lot of reasons you want to get out of leases. I've had people come to me 2 days after they sign a lease wanting to get out of it.
Do you think it's possible that he genuinely thought that your comments would make it more difficult for him to hire staff and attract patrons?
Objection. Go ahead.
Yes, I can see. Perhaps it is. Okay. But he has a lease. he signed. And I've been saying these things for years. I've been very consistent. I've been saying them from before he signed the lease.
You also note that he has a non-refundable deposit and has fully guaranteed the lease. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know whether that's true, that he had put up a non-refundable deposit?
I believe it's true, yes.
And at the end of the statement, it says this will have no effect on the completion and success of the project. Do you see that?
Yes.
Is that a true statement?
I'll tell you in about 5 years. I just don't know. I mean, I think it would have been very helpful to have the restaurant there.
And I know you say I'll tell you in about 5 years. What do you mean by that?
Well, I have to see how the hotel does.
Because you don't have a crystal ball and you don't know how it's going to do.
I don't know. I don't know. I think it'll be good, but you never know.
You never know. When you met with Ivanka, your daughter, about Mr. Zakarian's entity decision to terminate the lease agreement, did you have any discussion with her regarding what to do with the space now that both restaurants had decided to terminate their lease arrangements with the Trump organization?
Yes.
Okay. And could you tell us, to the best of your recollection, what you discussed with her at that time?
Well, I would have rather gotten, I think I told her this, I would have rather have gotten another signed lease from another restaurant, because that's the ideal situation, but we didn't have any time. You know, we don't want to be in construction while the hotel is open. So we had to have everything done at the same time. So in the case of Zakarian space, we are building essentially a very large conference room or meeting room. We wouldn't have had time to have a restaurant.
And you knew that at the time he terminated the lease?
Oh yeah, it was very tight. Even for him, it was very tight. But
so you said basically, we can't do this.
No, and we had to have the space finished. I didn't want to be building, 2 years into the project after everything opens and be building a space. I wanted to get it completed. So we decided on a ballroom, conference room, which we could start on right away.
And you made that decision virtually immediately?
No, but, sometime after I did.
And why particularly did you want to turn the space into a meeting room or suites?
I didn't. I would have much rather had Zakarian. I would have much rather had Zakarian. I think it would have been better for the hotel. But we didn't have an option. We lost our tenant. Our tenant, defaulted on his lease. And so now we have this space, and I wanted to get it completed.
Now, in the document we looked at a minute ago where you had the statement by the Trump organization, it says, or actually it was an earlier one, you said we're already talking to some of the great chefs of the world. It wasn't in 162,
That's right.
I misspoke. So was that a true statement?
We were talking to the chef. We couldn't get him to make a deal. We couldn't get him to sign a lease.
And when you say you couldn't get him to sign a lease, it was important to your organization to have a lease and not a management deal?
I would rather have leases. That's why we have a management agreement with BLT, but I would rather have leases, yes.
And are you aware that there were a number of chefs, I think the record shows, that were interested in doing management deals for the northwest corner, the Zakarian space?
Yeah, but management deal is much different than a lease. A lease is much better to have.
Why?
Because it's certainty. You get your rent every month. The other one, you never know what's going to happen.
That's because what you get rises and falls based on the success of the restaurant?
That's correct.
And you don't know how the restaurant's going to do with any degree of certainty?
No, you never know.
Is that right?
With a lease, I know how a lease is going to do. It's going to pay me whatever the rent is.
But you can't say to any degree of certainty how a restaurant's going to do, so you don't want to do a management deal.
What I'd rather do is I'd rather have a lease.
But is what I said correct?
Yeah. Well, if we're saying the same thing, it's correct. I'd rather have a lease.
Yeah. because you can't ever say to any degree of certainty how a restaurant's going to do, and therefore you don't know how you're going to do under a management
You
deal.
don't know how anybody's going to do at anything. With the least you get your rent.
And has that been a philosophy that you've followed?
Generally, yes. Wherever possible.
It is possible under a management deal for that space that the restaurant could do, as you've said, you think Zakarian might have done really well in that space, correct?
Yes.
So it's possible that under a management deal, a restaurant would do really well, correct?
But it would never give us the kind of income that we were going to get from Zakarian in the term of rent, in rent.
How much less would you make? I mean, we'll strike that. If the restaurant under a management deal in that same space were highly successful, the hotel could make more money than under a lease. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I would almost say if it broke even, I'd be happy and service the hotel. In other words, if the restaurant under a management agreement broke even and serviced the hotel, I would say that would be considered somewhat successful.
Why?
Because we want to service the hotel. And it's not easy to make money with a restaurant, especially when you're not in the restaurant yourself. So he can manage his own restaurant. We're not, we're a big company that has a lot of different things. So it's not easy. So having a restaurant where the restaurant pays rent is a very valuable thing.
But you can't say how much you would or wouldn't have made under a management deal either, correct?
No, but I told you if I could have broken even with it, I would have been happy.
But you're doing a management deal with BLT, correct?
Yes, because we have to service the hotel. Not because we have to service the hotel.
But you don't know whether you may do very well on that management deal as well. You may make money, correct?
I may, but again, if I broke even, I'd be happy.
Okay. I'm going to turn to the letter of credit in this case.
Okay.
Show you what's already been marked as Exhibit 165. It's a compilation of documents related to the letter of credit that Mr. Zakarian's entity posted. You'll see the applicant is CZ National, the beneficiary Trumpold Post Office LLC. Did you have an understanding of what the letter of credit was supposed to cover?
No, I just know it was a letter of credit for maybe a deposit or something. I never saw the letter of credit. I just know I knew we had a guarantee and a letter of credit.
And did you understand that someone from your organization had to certify to the M&T Bank that the Trump organization had the legal right to draw down on the letter of credit?
Objection Foundation.
I don't know that. I just don't know. You'd have to ask the lawyers about that.
I'd like you to turn, please, Mr. Trump, to looks like it's the 4th page in terms of pieces of paper in this document. It says it's a statement. There.
Keep going, Mr. Trump.
Okay.
It's the one with the signature.
It's the one that says statement.
Yeah,
at the
there are
top.
2. There's a site draft and a statement.
Okay, got it.
Got it?
I have site
You
draft.
have
Which
site
one do you
draft.
Here's double signing.
Oh, okay. Got it.
You're okay.
Okay, I got them both.
Okay. You see that statement
Yes.
to the M&T Bank
Yes.
stating tenant is in default of the sublease beyond the applicable notice and cure period, and landlord is entitled to draw under the letter of credit pursuant to the terms, if any, of this sublease.
Correct.
Is that your signature?
Yes.
And is it your signature on the site draft on the prior page?
Yes.
Okay. Prior to signing this statement, or strike that. What was your understanding at the time in 2015, July of 2015, as to how this process worked for drawing down on a letter of credit?
I mean, I had no understanding. I know a letter of credit is a very powerful instrument, and I've never had a problem with a letter of credit before.
What do you mean? Never had a
Meaning,
problem.
when you submit a letter of credit, when you tell a bank somebody's violated an agreement, they pay. You know, it's a very strong document. It's a very strong concept. And very, very seldom is a letter of credit challenged because they're almost unchallengeable. So I was surprised. I don't even know that they are challenging the letter of credit. I don't know enough about the lawsuit to know that. But letter of credit's a very powerful document.
And that's because if you tell the bank I'm entitled to get my money, the bank has to pay you your money.
That's true.
So is that effectively what you were doing here, saying I'm entitled to get my money?
Yes.
Objection.
What did you do prior to signing this statement to assure yourself that you were accurately making the representation to the bank that you were entitled to draw down those funds?
I asked my lawyers. This one right here.
And I do not want to ask you what
Okay.
Mr. Garten told you, but did you do anything else to factually assure yourself that you were making a factually correct representation to the bank?
No.
Did you go to the lease to look at what you're entitled to do with the letter of credit
I
proceeds?
assume my lawyer did.
Did you have, other than speaking to Mr. Garten, did you have any other communications with anybody about drawing down on the letter of credit?
Perhaps my children, but mostly my attorney.
Do you remember any conversations
No,
with
I
your
don't.
children?
No.
Did you or anyone on your behalf have any conversations with the bank about drawing down on the letter of
I
credit?
don't know. I didn't, but I don't know.
Do you know, as of the time that you signed this statement, did you know what your damages were relative to the termination of the
No,
lease?
it wasn't something that I was doing.
Okay. And at the time you signed this certification, you understand, don't you, that the CZ national obligation to pay rent hadn't even begun to accrue yet?
I don't understand anything. I frankly was just given this by my attorneys. They said this is proper.
Yep.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't want to ask you what your
I
attorney
relied
told
on
you.
my attorneys, okay, to put it differently.
Okay. Good.
Now she's at me.
Okay. Were you privy to any discussions regarding a decision to file suit in this case?
Yes, I was.
And who were those discussions with?
I think it was mostly my children, Don, Ivanka, and Alan Garten.
And who made the decision to file suit?
Maybe as a group.
No. At the time you made the decision, is it fair to say you didn't know the extent of your damages?
I would say yes, yeah.
I think I'm just about done. If we could take a 5-minute break,
Okay.
I'll consult with my colleagues who are a lot smarter than I am, and they'll be able to tell me what I've screwed up
Fine.
here
Okay.
and what questions I forgot to ask
You didn't screw up anything. Thank you
Going
very
off
much.
the record, the time is 11:40.
Oh, we.
Back on the record, the time is 11:53.
Okay, Mr. Trump, just briefly, did you personally have any conversations with any other chefs or restaurateurs regarding either of the restaurant spaces in the old post office?
Yes.
Who?
John George, a long time ago.
When?
Long time. Maybe before Zakarian.
And what was the nature of that discussion?
See whether or not I could lease him the space.
And what did he say?
Couldn't do it, not as a lease.
He was interested in a management deal, but not a lease?
I didn't go to the management agreement. It was early on, so I didn't feel, I had more time.
But he basically wasn't interested in doing something in a lease.
Also, I don't think he wanted to pay the build out. One of the very good things you get from a lease is that, in this case, your client would have to spend all of the money to build out the space. And
less the tenant improvement allowance.
well, other than whatever may
you
be in
agreed
the
to
sure,
put in,
there
right.
might be some stuff that we get, but basically they would be building out their space. That's, that's millions of dollars that now I have to spend myself.
And do you know how much he had committed to spend on the build out?
No, but it would be millions of dollars.
You also testified earlier today that, to the extent that you think the hotel is going to do very well and perhaps even get a bump up because of your campaign, you don't know how much of a bump it's going to get because of the campaign, correct?
No, I don't.
I think we can probably all agree you don't have a crystal ball, and
Right.
neither do I.
Right.
And you said you thought it would do better with a restaurant. Do you think it?
Yes,
And
I do.
I want to understand what you meant by that. What did?
Well, I think the restaurant would bring people. A good restaurant like this one would bring people, so that would benefit the hotel in addition to the rent and the additional rent
Bring people where?
to the hotel.
To stay in the hotel?
Yeah, sure.
Do you think that that was the Zakarian name that would bring people to stay in the hotel?
It's got a good name.
But do you think that his name would have materially impacted the number of people who stayed at the hotel?
It's possible.
But you don't know.
Well, people would come to the hotel and they might stay there because there's a good restaurant.
But do you have any way of knowing whether that would have really happened?
I think it will happen. I can't tell you how much. People, a lot of times when they come to a hotel, they'll check the restaurant. If it's a good restaurant, they'll stay at a hotel as opposed to the one across the street or the one in a different part of town.
Have you ever done any analysis of the extent to which that actually
No,
happens?
I have not. But having a good restaurant in a hotel will increase your business, sometimes dramatically.
But you've never done any analysis or looked at any analysis of how much?
No, but I'm sure there are companies that have done that in various other hotels, and they would be able to tell you. But having a good restaurant and having a name restaurant in a hotel can increase the business in that hotel very substantially.
Do you know whether there's any analysis of whether having a second restaurant in a hotel, when you've already got one, the incremental effect of the second?
No, that I don't know.
Okay.
But it wouldn't have hurt. I think it would have been good.
So, and when you say it wouldn't have hurt, having a second restaurant there with Zakarian in it wouldn't have hurt, and you think it would have been good?
I think having a good restaurant in a hotel is a very good thing for the hotel. It's one of the reasons we made the deal.
Okay. And therefore, if you could have a very good restaurant in the hotel under a management deal, that wouldn't change the effect that had on the hotel, correct?
If you could get somebody good, but it's a different kind of a thing. We have a restaurant coming in now. It's hopefully a good restaurant. I hope they do a good job, but we couldn't get them signed to a lease.
Right. My point is simply, I understand what you're saying about having a restaurant there, potentially to some degree driving the revenue of the hotel, and driving the number of people who stays there. You can't quantify how much, but you have a sense that it is a favorable thing that attracts people to come and stay there, correct?
Go ahead.
Do you know whether it causes them to pay more to stay there, in your experience?
I really don't know, but look, it's common sense. Having a good restaurant's a positive thing.
Okay. So can we agree that having a restaurant being a positive thing to potential patrons of the hotel and the restaurant, from the patron standpoint and from the hotel business standpoint, in terms of room occupancy, it doesn't matter whether it's a restaurant, a management deal or a lease?
It depends. Generally, and you can, I think there are studies of this, when somebody essentially owns it, through a lease, if you call it a form of ownership, you'll find the restaurants are better managed.
But in terms of...
Do you understand what I mean?
I understand what you're saying, but...
When they're responsible to pay rent, when they're responsible for all of those things, including payroll, et cetera, when you have a lease, they are responsible for that bottom line. And it's not this big, massive company that will have too many employees and maybe the service won't be as good. A lot of different things. When you're responsible, when you have a lease to pay, in the case of Zakarian, you know what the number is. Oftentimes you'll find that that's a better run restaurant. It's like ownership. It's a better run restaurant than if you have a management agreement.
They got skin in the game.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't think I asked my question very well. In terms of the population out there who are restaurant goers,
Right.
as I understood your testimony earlier, the restaurant is a bigger draw, and potentially you get, if you have a celebrity chef or if you have a really good restaurant, potentially more people are going to come and stay in the hotel.
It could be, yes.
It could be. You don't know, but it could be.
Could be.
So if you have a celebrity chef in the hotel and you think that's going to be a big draw, in terms of the draw factor for getting people into the hotel, does it matter whether it's a management deal or a lease?
Objection asked and answered.
Well, I mean, the problem is we couldn't get anybody. I mean, and we didn't have enough time to get anybody because we were let down by Zakarian. We were really let down. He had his lease. He was all set. He was going to spend all this money on building this place. All of a sudden, he says he's going to violate his lease. So, we didn't have enough time because we're, in the meantime, getting ready to open a hotel. We're going to be opening very shortly, as you know, in a few months. And almost less than that. And we didn't have time to do that. Had we had more time, we would have been maybe in a position where we could have gotten somebody. But in the meantime, we weren't. And a very big factor is the fact that Zakarian was going to spend millions of dollars building out his space. Okay. And now we're going to have to spend millions of dollars to build out whatever space it is.
Here, I'm just trying to focus on the element of your testimony where you said a celebrity chef or a really successful restaurant, a good restaurant, can be a draw for patrons to the hotel.
Yeah, but restaurants are better when there's a lease than when there's a management agreement.
But my point is simply, if you have a management deal with a celebrity chef versus a lease with a celebrity chef, if the celebrity chef is drawing patrons in because of their celebrity, does it matter to the patrons whether it's a management deal or a lease?
No, but you'll find that the quality is better when there's a lease.
Okay.
That's been historically proven.
You testified earlier today, Mr. Trump, that with respect to why it's good to have a lease, that you're going to get your rent. That's
right.
What you're going to get. And you understand that there were at least a couple of different components of rent, and
Sure.
I put quotes around rent under this lease. There's base rent and percentage rent.
Correct.
When you say you're going to get your rent, you're talking about the base rent, right? Not the percentage rent?
Yeah.
Because
but I think he would have done very well. I think he would have made a lot of percentage rent. I think he was going to do very well with this restaurant. People were talking about it. I think he would have paid a lot of percentage rent.
But when you were talking about earlier what you're going to get, you were talking about the base rent. I'm just trying to figure out what you were talking about.
Well, I get the minimum of the base
right,
rent.
Right.
But
okay.
Then, in addition, I think he would have done very well. I think we would have gotten good percentage.
Right. No, I understand that sitting here today,
Right.
you think that.
I do think.
But when you're talking about the benefits of a lease and what you're, no matter what you do, no matter what you go out there and say, you're going to get your rent. When you made that testimony, you're talking about base rent because you don't know whether you're going to get percentage rent.
Look, I will say this. We know we're going to get the one. I think he's going to do very well, but you can certainly never tell what's going to happen.
Right. Okay. Anything else? I don't have any further questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming.
Done?
You're done.
Okay.
You're done.
you. Nice to meet you. Thank you.
If there are no further questions, this marks the end of the deposition. Off the record at 12:03.